Think your garden is healthy just because it looks green on top? You might be missing a vital sign of its true well-being. A garden without worms is like a car without an engine. It might look good, but it won't go anywhere. If you've been wondering why your plants seem lackluster despite your best efforts, or why your soil feels more like concrete than the rich, crumbly earth you see in gardening magazines, the answer might be wriggling right beneath your feet, or rather, not wriggling at all. Prepare to transform your approach to gardening as we reveal how a few simple changes can turn your soil into a thriving ecosystem that will have your neighbors wondering what your secret is. When you walk through your garden beds, do you notice an eerie silence? Not the peaceful kind that comes with a well-tended space, but the unsettling quiet of soil that lacks the bustling underground community it should naturally support. This absence of earthworms represents one of the most overlooked yet critical problems facing home gardeners today. While we obsess over the visible aspects of our gardens, the perfect spacing of plants, the symmetry of our raised beds, the color coordination of our flowers, we're often completely blind to the invisible workforce that should be operating beneath our feet. The shocking truth about what a lack of earthworms really means goes far beyond simply missing out on some soil-dwelling creatures. When your garden lacks earthworms, you're dealing with soil that has essentially flatlined. These remarkable organisms are nature's soil engineers, and their absence signals a breakdown in the fundamental systems that make healthy plant growth possible. A wormless garden is like trying to run a restaurant without a kitchen. Everything might look organized from the dining room, but nothing essential is actually happening behind the scenes. This silent problem is far more critical than most gardeners realize, especially when it comes to your harvest this season. Without earthworms constantly aerating your soil, creating channels for root expansion, and cycling nutrients from organic matter into forms your plants can readily absorb, you're essentially asking your vegetables and flowers to perform at their peak while starving them of the infrastructure they need to succeed. The timing couldn't be more crucial. Addressing this issue now sets the foundation for not just this year's growing season, but for years of abundant harvests to come. So, understanding what earthworms actually do requires looking beyond the simple notion of dirt. These incredible creatures are honestly living, breathing soil conditioners that work around the clock to transform your garden environment. As they tunnel through the earth, they create this intricate network of channels that serve as highways for air, water, and nutrients to reach plant roots. Their digestive process breaks down organic matter and transforms it into worm castings, a nutrient-rich fertilizer that's often called black gold by experienced gardeners. Without this constant activity, your soil becomes a static environment where nutrients remain locked up and unavailable to your plants. The impact of compacted, lifeless soil on root development really cannot be overstated. Plant roots are opportunistic. They'll take the path of least resistance as they search for water and nutrients. In compacted soil without worm tunnels, roots must work exponentially harder to penetrate dense earth, often resulting in shallow, weak root systems that leave plants vulnerable to drought stress and nutrient deficiencies. This directly translates to weaker plants with lower disease resistance, reduced flowering, and, honestly, disappointing harvests that leave you wondering where you went wrong. The connection between poor soil structure and increased water runoff becomes especially problematic during intense weather periods. When summer heat arrives and you're trying to keep your garden hydrated, compacted soil without worm channels simply can't absorb water efficiently. Instead of soaking into the root zone where plants need it, precious irrigation water runs off the surface, taking valuable topsoil and nutrients with it. This creates a frustrating cycle where you're watering more frequently but seeing diminishing returns, all while your water bills climb and your plants continue to show signs of stress. Diagnosing your garden. Are you missing out? Well, determining whether your garden is a worm wasteland or a bustling underground ecosystem actually requires a bit of detective work, but honestly, the clues are more obvious than you might think. You'll want to start by selecting a few representative areas of your garden, ideally spots where you've noticed plant performance issues or areas that seem to struggle despite, giving them plenty of care. Early morning or just after a light rain provides the best conditions for this little investigation, since those are the times when earthworm activity is naturally higher. The most revealing test really involves digging a small hole about 8 to 10 inches deep and taking a good look at both the soil you've removed and the walls of the hole itself. Healthy, worm-active soil will show obvious signs of their presence. You'll see small tunnels and channels throughout the soil profile a generally loose and crumbly texture, and often those visible worm castings that look like small, rounded pellets of dark, rich-looking soil. The soil should have a pleasant, earthy smell. That's what gardeners often describe as the scent of life. But if instead you encounter dense, uniform soil that kind of resists your shovel, has few if any visible channels and smells flat or even a bit sour, well, you're probably looking at a worm-deficient environment. Visual cues and textural clues actually go beyond what you find when you're digging. The surface of healthy, worm-active soil often shows small mounds of castings, especially after rain or watering. The soil should feel alive in your hands. It should crumble easily when you squeeze it, rather than forming a hard clay-like ball or just falling apart like sand. And when you water, you should see the water being absorbed relatively quickly, not just running off or pooling on the surface. Acting now before the fall planting season really gives you the maximum opportunity to establish conditions that will support worm populations through the winter and into next year's growing season. The Worm Welcome Wagon, attracting your new best friends. So creating an environment that attracts and sustains earthworm populations really starts with understanding what these little creatures need to thrive. Earthworms require 3 fundamental things: food in the form of decomposing organic matter, adequate moisture levels, and soil that isn't too acidic or alkaline. The most effective approach centers around building a consistent supply of organic matter that will both feed existing worms and attract new ones to your garden beds. Compost represents the ultimate worm magnet, but success depends on how you integrate it into your garden system. Rather than simply dumping finished compost on top of your beds once or twice a year, think about creating a continuous feeding program. Work compost into the top few inches of soil in spring, then maintain a light layer of partially decomposed organic matter throughout the growing season. This might include kitchen scraps buried directly in garden beds, leaves chopped and worked into the soil, or grass clippings allowed to decompose in place. The key is consistency. Earthworms need a reliable food source to establish permanent residence, rather than simply passing through your garden. Cover crops and strategic mulching create the hospitable environment earthworms need for long-term survival. Cover crops like clover, winter rye, or crimson clover, planted in unused garden areas or between rows, provide both food and habitat. Their root systems improve soil structure while their eventual decomposition feeds the worm population. Mulching with organic materials like straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips maintains soil moisture levels and provides slow-release nutrition as these materials break down. However, avoid common garden practices that inadvertently repel or harm earthworms. Excessive tilling disrupts their tunnel systems. Over-application of synthetic fertilizers can alter soil chemistry in ways that make it inhospitable, and certain pesticides can be directly toxic to beneficial soil organisms. Revitalize your soil, a garden thriving with life. The transformation that occurs when earthworm populations establish themselves in your garden extends far beyond the worms themselves. It's quite fascinating. A thriving worm population indicates a healthy, biodiverse soil ecosystem that includes beneficial bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. These organisms work together to create optimal growing conditions. It's like a little community down there. This biological activity increases the soil's water-holding capacity, improves drainage in clay soils, and enhances nutrient availability in ways that no amount of synthetic fertilizers can replicate. Isn't that amazing? The results, well, they become visible within a single growing season, but the full benefits really compound over time. Plants growing in worm-active soil develop more extensive, healthier root systems that translate directly into improved drought tolerance, better nutrient uptake, and increased resistance to soil-borne diseases. You'll notice that your plants recover more quickly from transplant shock, show more vigorous growth during the peak growing season, and often produce higher yields with better flavor profiles. The soil itself becomes easier to work. Your shovel will slide through it effortlessly, and hand weeding becomes significantly easier as plant roots release more readily from the loose, well-structured earth. Your actionable next steps to ensure your garden never goes wormless again involve establishing sustainable practices that support long-term soil health. Begin by incorporating organic matter regularly rather than sporadically. Even small weekly additions of kitchen scraps or grass clippings will maintain the consistent food supply earthworms need. Minimize soil disturbance by adopting no-till or low-till practices whenever possible, allowing the tunnel systems that worms create to remain intact. Test your soil pH annually and adjust if necessary, as earthworms prefer slightly neutral conditions. Most importantly, be patient. Building a thriving worm population takes time, but once established, these remarkable creatures will continue working to improve your garden's health for years to come. The transformation from a lifeless, compacted garden bed to a thriving ecosystem teeming with beneficial earthworms represents one of the most fundamental improvements you can make as a gardener. By understanding the critical role these creatures play and taking concrete steps to attract and sustain them, you're not just improving this year's harvest. You're building the foundation for a garden that will continue to improve and reward your efforts season after season. Ready to transform your garden into a worm paradise? Subscribe to The Humus Heritage for more soil-building secrets, and share this guide with fellow gardeners who are ready to discover what their soil has been missing. Your earthworm army is waiting. Let's get them enlisted.